Hi friends and new friends, and welcome to the third episode of the Darren Tapp Files. In this episode, we're talking all about security and digital currency. The first half of the show is going to be all about basics of digital currency security, so if you're a newcomer to the space, watch out for that one. And if you're not a newcomer to the space, you might want to fast forward to the end where we talk about Dash and the particular advantages that it has as the most secure digital currency right now. It has the normal proof of work block mining similar to Bitcoin, but it also has instant transaction locking prior to the block, and it also has block locking after the block's been found. So it has triple level security, and we're going to go into that later. I'm Christopher Carruthers, also known as Tao of Satoshi, and you're watching Cash Alternative TV. So what is Cash Alternative TV other than that catchy jingle? Well, it's a show about digital currency with a focus on Dash, which aims to be a digital cash for the world, an alternative to cash. If that's something that you're interested in, you want to learn more about Dash, or just want to hang out with me some more, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss an episode. So now on to the topic of today's show. This interview is a pretty long one, around an hour long. It was actually an hour and 40 minutes at one point, but I managed to pack in all the information in an hour. But if you don't want to watch the whole video, I've linked the timestamps below so you can click on any topic that might interest you and have a look. So without further ado, let's get into this third episode of the Darren Tapp Files. Welcome back to the show, Darren.
Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah, so this third episode of the Darren Tapp Files, we're going to be talking all about crypto security, how to keep your crypto secure, and some items with Dash, some interesting features that Dash has. We're going to go into that in the second half. So the first topic we're going to talk about is private keys and public keys. This is something that's very interesting with cryptocurrency. So we'd like to hear more about it from Professor. What do you have to say about public keys versus private keys, Darren?
It's how cryptocurrency works. So if you want to accept cryptocurrency, what will happen is your wallet will generate, or the software will generate a random number. And that's all it is. It's just a random number. And that is kept private. And that's called a private key. And then in order to spend the money, your wallet will need to publish what's called a public key, and the address is related to the public key. So then when you spend, you would need to publish what's called a public key and then a signature. So a signature would take a message, in this case the transaction, and prove produce something that would be almost impossible to compute if that relies on that message if you did not know the private key. So that's how this public and private key cryptography works for payments. So there's a random number generated, that's your private key, and then in order to spend, you need to share a public key related to the address, and then have a signature. That's how Bitcoin and Dash and other cryptocurrencies, pretty much all of them use that same signature scheme.
Okay, so what are the differences if you're a newcomer to cryptocurrency? Is the private key longer than the public key? How would you know what's a private key and what's a public key?
Well, the address is generally shorter than the private key. And but the public key, which you never really see if you use the software, the public key is around the same size, I guess, as far as number of bits. When you look at a private key, it's going to look like a bunch of gibberish. Just like when you look at an address, it looks like a bunch of gibberish. If you want to look it up, an address is actually a base 58 number, and a private key, I believe they also use base 58 to express it, but there's more digits in it, so it's a little bit longer.
Okay, can you speak to the cryptography of how a public key relates to a private key? Like how do they come in tandem?
Yeah, I can. So if you look into it, Bitcoin for payments and Dash for payments uses the elliptic curve digital signature algorithm, and a private key is just a number. Now, that number is kind of interpreted on a circle, a really big circle. Like imagine a clock where you go tick, 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 tick every second, and there's more ticks than there are atoms in the universe. So you just go, it's like a big, so the number, even though you can pick any random number, it's kind of interpreted as somewhere in this circle. And then you can take that number and compute the public key And this is actually very quick for computers to do. So let me draw an elliptic curve, right?
Sure.
So let's see, I'm still getting this. So,
for the viewers out there that don't know, I did introduce him in the intro, but if you're just coming into it now, Darren Tapp is a professor. So he's showing us his professor skills.
Can you see that elliptic curve, Christopher?
I can.
Okay, good. Because I can't see it in my little thing. Okay, so the way the protocol works with these signatures is they pick some point, and then there's a process you can do where you can add a point to itself. So let's see, you pick this point, you can do, this would be like 2e, and then you can take e and 2e and add them, and it comes out here, and you get a third point, 3e. So
okay.
With elliptic curve cryptography, it's like as you take these numbers as you go around the circle, you kind of just hop around this elliptic curve. It's very easy to compute where you end up, but kind of this whole process of hopping, it's hard to understand that. And specifically, it's really hard to go from a point on this curve to back to the number. So the number is the private key and the point is the public key.
So you're saying that Bitcoin and Dash both use this type of elliptic curve?
Yeah. So Dash is a fork of Litecoin, which is a fork of Bitcoin, and that's never changed. To my knowledge, I don't think there's any project that uses a different curve for this. Theoretically, there's no reason you couldn't, but I think there's a very strong impetus to keep using it because, like we said in Kentucky, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Mm-hmm. It ain't broke, so why would we want to try a new one? And now, later in the show, we'll talk about some new signatures being brought in that Dash is using and why.
So I have a couple of questions. My first question is, what makes this so secure? How can somebody not brute force this and spend your cryptocurrency?
Well, it's that whole number of atoms in the universe thing. Like if you actually guess for a private key, the chances that you guess one that's already being used, that there's actually money stored at, as long as you have a good quality random number generator, then it's impractical to guess a private key. Now, in theory, you could, but it's just, and the whole Bitcoin and Dash rely on this, the fact that it's just very impractical to guess a private key. The way the protocol works, when you tell somebody your address and receive a payment, the public key is not even available to the network. The public key isn't available until there's a spend. And that was part of the initial setup in that, and it would be helpful kind of if this scheme became kind of weak, to kind of give people a chance to upgrade, more time to upgrade, if they keep using new addresses, which is the original way the protocol worked. So
okay, so let me start with that one. Let me go down that rabbit hole a little bit. So people use to use different addresses every time. So wouldn't we run out of addresses eventually?
No. I mean, okay, so how many addresses are there? There's around 2 to the 160 addresses, okay? And that's a very big number. That's approximately 10, if we divide this by 350, like that's probably even bigger than 10 to the 53rd power. So now, how many people are on Earth? Well, there's 10 to the, can you see that 10? Is that too low? No, that's good.
Yeah,
so
I'll let you know if I can't see it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So how many people on Earth? There's 7 billion people, right?
Yeah.
So let's say 10 billion. So that would be 10 to the 8, right?
Oh.
So if all the billion people have 1,000, then we're only a small fraction of all this total thing now. Now, when we talk about big numbers, it gets hard to write them, as you can imagine, right? If I had to write the national debt, 27 trillion, whatever it is, 23 trillion, whatever, it would take me a long time to write it. So what physicists and mathematicians do is they say, 10 to the 53, which means 1 with 53 zeros after it.
Wow.
And
okay.
So I was saying, if there's 10 billion people, that's a 1 with 8 zeros after it. And, even if people were guessing millions or billions or trillions, you still are just a small fraction of this one with 53 zeros after it.
Okay, so you're saying that this elliptical curve here has 2 to 160 zeros after it, addresses?
I'm saying that the total number of addresses is this. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so I guess people that are worried about that can rest assured that it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, and if I thought there was a problem, I wouldn't use it, and I'm using it. So.
Okay, so let's talk about a different thing that you see sometimes in cryptocurrency is multi-sig addresses. So how do they work?
Basically, somebody could make a payment. You could say, I have 5 people, and if 3 people sign off, I want them to be able to spend it. And this is really great. If you had a board with 5 people, this would allow the board to control money, but not let anybody run off with it. So what you could do is the money could come in and be stored or put on an address that's maybe a 3 of 5 address, or 4 of 5 address, or the protocol can go M of N, where N is I think it's less than 32. And then when they do a spend, the way that the multi-sig works on chain now is they'll actually each produce one signature, and they have to put that into the total transaction that does the spend. So they have to put 3 different signatures in. So that's how multi-sig works currently on chain.
Okay, so that diagram that you have back there with the elliptical curve, how do the multi-sigs handle that on the elliptical curve?
Okay, so what they do now is 3 people come up with random numbers. So there's P, Q, and R. And what is done is for a multi-sig currently on chain with Bitcoin and Dash and all that, what is done is they produce P produces one signature, Q produces another signature, R produces another signature, and they just get kind of appended to each other and put on chain.
All right, so thanks for that introduction to blockchain technology.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot today,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not even done. We're just getting started.
Right.
So what would you say to people that are worried about, quantum computers? How do you think that's going to affect the blockchain industry?
I think if a very viable quantum computer comes out, and it's not just any quantum computer, I think it would have to be a quantum computer that had an appropriate number of qubits, and perhaps for this situation, maybe 256 qubits. And there are some quantum computers that are sold as quantum computers, but I don't think they do the full functionality of a quantum computer. A quantum computer would threaten this whole elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. At least that's in all the sources I'm reading. You're not going to really worry about Bitcoin and Dash first. You really shouldn't worry about those first. You should worry about your bank account.
Oh.
You should worry about your credit card number, because the same cryptography is used to protect those things too. That shouldn't be your first concern, right? Your first concern should be.
So there's a lot of other things in life that use this cryptography.
Yes.
And they're probably going to attack those things first before they attack Bitcoin.
And when the quantum computers do actually start becoming fully functional, I think that your bank is going to start to realize this first. Security companies that the bank hires is going to start to notice this first, and they're going to start to recommend upgrading. And so when they start recommending upgrading, then I can turn to the Dash community and say, hey, look at what's happening over here. Maybe we should upgrade.
So these solutions are being worked on currently, right? Like you say that there's some that are not feasible right now, but I'm sure there's groups out there that are trying to improve this technology from a security standpoint.
Yeah. Think about it as terms of resources. Dash could say, okay, we're going to research this and come up with this great new quantum-proof signature. I mean, the whole Koblitz curve that Satoshi's using, that was in the national or the security standards. So we just wait for the new security standards to come out, and then if we need to, use those.
Okay, well, that was a good introduction into quantum computing. It's something that I was kind of worried about myself, but I'm glad that you're saying that there's people working on a solution.
I'm right now. I'm going to go down with the ship. I mean, I'll be going down with that ship as well as everybody else. But yeah, I would expect that your bank would know that ECDA, say, is threatened before before that quantum computer would be turned on cryptocurrency. And if you use these addresses without spends, you only have with Dash a 2.5-minute window before it confirms to try to do the double spend. Dash has InstantSend, so even with the quantum computer that's trying to attack, as soon as you put out the spend, it can get locked in with InstantSend, and the attacker is still. The attacker would, if they broke it, would be considered a double spend, and that would just be not considered valid because of InstantSend, right? So InstantSend really, I forget this all the time. InstantSend actually is a super duper quantum proof computer thing. It's just the only thing that quantum computer changes is don't reuse addresses. That's it.
All right, so let's move on from that. We're going to talk about, say if I'm a newcomer and I'm just coming into the cryptocurrency market, I bought my shiny new Dash from an exchange. How am I going to keep this Dash secure? Where should you download your hardware wallets from? You can't just download it from any place, right? You should go to the official websites of each cryptocurrency.
Yes. You should. Yeah, so you can go to dash.org, you can download it there. But you should also check the certificate. Like to make sure you're at the right address. So at the very least, you can look up in the corner and see that there's a lock, like a padlock. And then you also want to check that you spelled it right. So those two things can help prevent things. With Dash, you can download Dash to the client, and that software is that works just fine, but that's going to download the whole blockchain, which right now it's not huge. It's like 40, 50 gigabytes maybe. But, if Dash became very popular, we could be talking, I think Bitcoin's up to 300, 400, 500 gigabytes, which is really, it's starting to fill up a terabyte drive now. So if you did not want to, if you had limited computer resources, you can use Electrum, which doesn't download all the transactions. And I've had a lot of good experiences with Electrum. So, and that's using the SPV functionality, and that's fairly secure. Another thing people do is they use a Trezor or a hardware wallet. Now, a hardware wallet does provide a little extra security. Generally, they'll start up and they'll give you a number of words. You write those words down and you put them in a safe. You put them in a very secure location because those words can mean people get all your money. And then you interface with the blockchain through your computer. And when a signature is needing to be made, it has to query the Trezor, and only a signature leaves the device. The private key stays on the little stick. So even if you had a device that was terribly infected with malware or everything, it's most likely the case. Like if you're just using the software, assuming the software hasn't been affected, you're just going to get the signature out, and you're going to sign what you put in. So there should be a lot of security behind a hardware device.
Okay. So what are the differences between backing up with a seed and like backing up like a full wallet, like how when you're in a full wallet and it asks you to back up?
Yeah. So when you back up with a seed, you're using what's called an HD wallet, hyper deterministic wallet, or hyper deterministic wallet, HD. What an HD wallet does, but that 12 words, usually 12, it's kind of intended to be a secure password, because if your brain is thinking of a password, you're not going to think of something that random. And it's just the way humans' brains are. It's nothing against you, Christopher. It's just human brains only can remember so much random. Anyway, so the seed is supposed to just take the user error out of it, those 11 words. And so
it's basically forcing you to have a good password, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's the dictionary is quite small. So if you ever wrote down the seed right, there's only 2,000 some words, the general standard that's used. And okay, so now you have the seed, you have this random information, and with an HD wallet, you can take this random information and generate a whole sequence of random information. And so that's how HD keys work. With a lot of these hardware wallets, I think all of them have multi-coin support. Now, your question was about backing up. So you have the 12 words, you back up the seed. In theory, as long as the software is working, it can go through the right path to come up with all your addresses.
So whatever option the wallet gives you to back it up, you recommend backing up all your private keys, backing up your HD. No matter what wallet you're doing, always make sure you back it up, because you don't
generally you always use the HDC. Now, if you're using the Dash client now, where it's doing that full node implementation, you actually should back up your wallet every 1,000 spends and receive, every 1,000 transactions. So every time I receive 1,000 or spend 1,000, it's total, receiving and spending, I should back up my wallet.
Okay, perfect. So they're saying in crypto is that not your private keys, not your crypto. So if you wouldn't recommend leaving any crypto on exchanges, right?
No, generally no. Don't leave cryptos on exchanges. What I do is I trust an exchange either a little bit or a lot. And generally, if I trust the exchange a little bit, I'll just ask myself, does this on the exchange need to be traded for? Or will I probably want to trade it for something else in the next 3 weeks? And if the answer is no, I won't be trading it. I think you should take it off of the exchange and leave it, and then decide what to do with it later. I mean, 3 weeks later or 3 years later, it doesn't really matter. Okay. And some other exchanges I might trust more, like Coinbase. I'll ask myself the same question, but I'll say 3 months.
Okay, perfect. So definitely want to steer clear of exchanges. And when you buy any new cryptocurrency, make sure you send it to a wallet, whether it's a hardware wallet or a software wallet. Yeah. But it's much safer in your possession than it would be on an exchange in most circumstances.
Yeah, and you just be careful with your backups. Make sure you back it up. You got to secure your backups as well. You can't just put it on a paste bin on the internet. But just make sure you back it up. Just make sure you, and generally you want to keep your keys, because the reason why you want to keep your keys, because if you keep it at the exchange, then you're relying on the exchange to, that's what's called counterparty risk. If the exchange goes belly up, legally the exchange might be required to give you that money, but if they declare bankruptcy, they won't be.
Right. So not your keys, not your crypto, right?
Right.
So we're going to be talking about scams also in this next segment. There's a lot of shady characters out there that are just willing to take your crypto by any means, right? So you have to be very careful.
Right, and especially for the Dash community, there is the need for every user, everybody, to be very in tune, in focus, and concerned and worried about scams. Okay. So the early days of Bitcoin, this is totally true. I mean, this is just what happened, right? Somebody came up with something they called the Bitcoin Savings and Trust, which it advertised itself as a bank. Now, they hadn't done all the legal stuff to be a bank, but the whole point of Bitcoin is you didn't need a bank. So now somebody's advertising that they're a Bitcoin bank, and they said, oh, you put your money on deposit and you get 7% interest. Now, 7% interest in today's climate is a lot. 7% annual is a lot, but this was like 7% over a week or a month or something. It was ridiculous, whatever they were offering in exchange. And so always be skeptical when somebody says you get something for nothing. As a good actor in the space, I was skeptical. I actually went to the forum and was asking the guy that was doing this. He went by the moniker Pirate at 40, and I asked him, and how does he make his money? And it just didn't. Whatever he said didn't make sense. Okay. And then, as somebody who likes to go through the technical things, some people aren't as technical, but sometimes when things don't make sense, they really shouldn't make sense. And this was probably one of those times, because eventually the whole scheme went belly up. It does fall under the classification of a Ponzi scheme, where the future people pay off the prior people. So eventually it goes belly up. A lot of people lost a lot of money. And so because I was asking the questions and wasn't satisfied with the answers, I didn't lose any money. And that was in the early days of Bitcoin. Now, the way that turned out is the authorities found this guy. He was in Texas, and he has been brought into trial and whatever. So that guy was arrested. Now, this happened in early Dash history. I think the consequences of that could be much more severe, because Dash has the masternodes. If the scammer was the one that acquired all of the Bitcoin or all the Dash, and they did this, the scammer could do this through a Ponzi scheme, then they might have an undue influence on the Masternode network, the community in general.
And it's not only individuals that you have to watch out for. There's also some instances of entire currencies being scammed, such as BitConnect.
Yes. Yeah, that was it. And they had this lending platform. If you try to go through the details, it might make a little bit more sense, but still the returns were way high. And then, it goes under like in 2 days, it's done. It goes to zero.
All right. So speaking of going from one coin to another, our next topic is about airdrops, and people offering to give you cryptocurrency and another crypto for your private keys on the crypto that you're currently in. So what are some safe practices to do for that? Just avoid it altogether?
On the DashPay Reddit, somebody said, hey, there's going to be this project that rewards all four different projects, and Dash was one of them. And so if you had so they basically can make a new blockchain that has credits already at addresses that are controlled by private keys, that you maybe have private keys with Dash, and you can use that private key to control money on a different project. Okay. And like I said, always be skeptical when there's something for nothing. So this is a chance to be skeptical. So when that post came out, I responded, be careful, because I don't have time to audit it. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I don't want to say it's wrong when it's not. I just say be careful, right? Because I just won't want people to get all excited and think they're going to get this free money. They might, but be careful. Mm-hmm. And then the response I got to that was from the person that posted originally, was actually accurate. Right? So basically you want to, I would treat any project that was giving you something for nothing with a severe amount of skepticism. And so I'm never going to, in any circumstances, allow them to control the Dash that I have. Okay. So now pretty much the only way that I could try to capture whatever they're offering, and do it in a way that I feel secure about, is I'd have my private, usually I take like a snapshot in time, like at this time, that's everybody has money here at this time, or this block height or something, will have money on this other project. So wait for that to happen, then start up a new wallet with a new seed or new everything, right? And transfer from my old wallet to the new one that should have had new randomness, nothing, so there's no relationship between two. You just send everything from one to the other. And then after you do that, you can take the private keys for your old wallet and put them in to whatever, and it could be a scam or not, but at least your money's kind of moved, so they can't take it. So that was the response I got on Reddit, and that's correct. If you move the money first and then put in your private keys, that should work. Personally, I'm not going to rush out to do this. I mean, a lot of these new projects they're new, so they're not tested. They're giving away a lot for free. So imagine if assuming they're even they're 100% honest, they're giving away a lot up front. So a lot of people are just going to take it and cash out. So, so the prices are already going to have a huge downward push on it. I'm going to not even touch this other project
Okay, so it's kind of a big process if you want to claim something from another cryptocurrency. So make sure that it's something that you really feel is beneficial for you to do it.
Yeah.
So, but before you interact with the new cryptocurrency, Darren's telling us to make sure you transfer your money to a new address. So any chance that this new cryptocurrency has a chance to steal your Dash, they're not going to do it because there's nothing left in that wallet.
And you've got to be careful. So when you do to a new address, if it's under the same seed, and you put your seed in somewhere, you've just given away all your money. I'm going to change what you said. I didn't say send it to a new address. I said send it to a whole new wallet.
Okay.
Yeah, send it to a whole new wallet because there are things that can go wrong. Send it to a new wallet, just new, completely new, fresh wallet.
Everything new. Okay.
Yeah. And be sure your old one's backed up because that's why I'm going to be so patient because there's so many things that can go wrong. I'm saying send it to a new wallet. Now I've introduced the problem that you have to have the old one backed up. Like something could go wrong, and then you might have to go back to the backup. So you want to make sure did all that right. So I mean, everything I'm suggesting causes new problems. It's just
right. So it's probably just better to avoid these airdrops altogether.
And that's why I personally am going to be very patient.
Okay, right. So that concludes our first half of the show talking about general crypto security. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Dash technology and things that it's doing to improve its security on the network. We're going to start with Masternode network. How did the Masternodes begin, Darren, and what did they look like when they started?
Well, they happened a while ago, and they happened before I got interested in the Dash project, like interested enough to start reading about it. And so what they are, basically the thinking was that Bitcoin had all this money going to mining, and the mining does produce some level of security, provides some level of security. But if you actually reduce the amount of mining, you don't really reduce the amount of security that much. Like you can half the amount of mining, you don't half your security. You go from like super secure to super secure, right? It's not, nobody knows where the appropriate balance is, but the thinking was it's just too high. It was just too much. You're paying too much. And so they were thinking, the thinking was that, hey, maybe that money can be used to provide other services. And one thing to have these networks running well, one service you need is for people to actually run nodes. And so early on, it was set up that people who could provide some evidence they were actually running a node could actually get part of that mining reward, part of the new issuance of the coin. Now it's not a mining reward anymore because you're not mining, but the new issuance of the coin. So the masternodes are people that are running the software, and they get compensated for running the software. So that's what
why is it beneficial to have a network of nodes online 24/7 and that have a high quality hardware behind them? Why is that important?
Have you ever wanted to go to your bank and it was closed? Right? So you want it on 24/7 because you want everybody to use it. This is a global thing, so you can't close it down for an hour because even if it's an hour while the U.S. is asleep, China's awake, somebody's awake somewhere.
Okay.
Somebody wants to spend something somewhere. So there's really no way to do this that it can ever shut down. And the fact that you have a lot of nodes running, that takes away one central point of failure. So, say somebody said, I want to take out this network, they might be able to take out a few, but if they take down a few, all the other ones will keep the network going. It provides decentralization, so there's no central point of failure, and it provides redundancy, so when things fail, you've got everything backed up, basically.
All right, so for newcomers to this channel or this show that are just watching, the Dash masternodes actually perform many valuable services for the Dash network, such as InstantSend and PrivateSend, and they also have decentralized voting. So what do you say, Darren, to the people that ask, why do you need 1,000 Dash to start a masternode? Is it something about Sybil attacks, right?
Right. So that's what I say. So it's for Sybil attacks. So a Sybil attack in computer terminology is where one person pretends like they're 100,000 people, and so so voting systems online and this has happened. Bodie McBoatface named some vote. They were like, let's vote on his name, and then the vote came up. Bodie McVoteface had the most votes. Now, it could have been that people just thought that was funny and they voted for it. But if it didn't happen in this case, it has happened in other cases that people in certain online forums get together and they say we're going to, vote for Bodie McVoteface. Okay, or sometimes it's not as a polite term as Bodie McVoteface. But anyway, they say we're going to vote, and so that's an example of a civil attack. So where basically one people or one small group of people act like they're a big group of people, and on the computer and on the internet nobody knows you're a dog. So, so like people don't know who's voting, right? They could be dogs voting or just bots or computers voting, not people. So that's what a civil attack is. It's very real. And so when you have these nodes supporting the network, you don't want one entity to spin up 500,000 nodes and have like most of the network, right? Because then you would kind of know everything's going on. So the 1,000 dash that's staked for a masternode. So the people that want to run masternodes get rewarded for it need to first have 1,000 dash, and they have to make a transaction on the chain to put exactly 1,000 dash at one address, and then they can run their masternode.
Okay, so the functions that masternodes enable, other than voting, are also PrivateSend and InstantSend. So the people that are concerned with privacy, they want to use PrivateSend. And say if we didn't have this civil attack protection, what could possibly happen in a PrivateSend transaction if somebody gains control of a masternode?
Well, currently, if you do a PrivateSend transaction, you say, hey, I want to do PrivateSend. And let me just pick on 4 other people. I don't know. It might be 7 or 8. But like 4 other people would say, hey, I want to do PrivateSend transaction, right? And I have the 10 dash or 1 dash or 0.1 dash or whatever that I want to do a PrivateSend transaction with. And so what those 5 will say, hey, and they'll contact one masternode, and the masternode will produce a transaction that takes those 5 inputs and gives them 5 outputs that, so Alice sent her dash in and it comes out somewhere else, and Bob sent it in and it comes out somewhere else, and Carl sent it in somewhere else, Debbie and Ava, same thing, right? And so that's so this transaction with 5 inputs and 5 outputs is put on the chain, and now it's difficult to determine what input goes with what output. Now, the masternode that constructed that could theoretically record that information, okay? But with PrivateSend, there's several rounds. So it used to be default to 2, and now they're suggesting you default to more than 2, but it goes up to 8 or something. So with PrivateSend, after you do that shuffle, you would do it again. And when you do it again, it's going to pick another masternode, and hopefully, even if the first one was recording everything, hopefully the second one wasn't. And then you do it again. Hopefully the third one wasn't. You do it again. Hopefully the fourth one wasn't. And usually that's where people stop.
Yeah, and so with the masternodes having this 1,000 dash collateral, they generally have the best interests of the network at heart because they have their investment in it.
Yes.
So that's why you don't want to have a whole bunch of nodes that don't have any investment at all to be handling these PrivateSend transactions.
Yeah, and the original, when Evan was coming out with this, he was saying that, they're not going to attack the network because they have an economic incentive not to, because they have 1,000 dash that they have skin in the game. That's the thing. So they're not going to want to, inhibit or hurt their investment. Now, when I was going through kind of Dash's documentation, I kind of assumed there's an attacker that just wants to ruin the whole network. And some changes that have happened since now there's some things that are so secure that it doesn't rely on just the economic incentive. There are some kind of more hardening things they've done. So even somebody that wants to ruin the network, and that's their goal, would still have a difficult time doing it. So.
Yeah. All right. So that's that. You mentioned to me before we started recording that you wanted to mention how the masternodes have changed since version 13 and 14. So
yes.
How have the masternodes changed?
So before, the masternodes they had to come to their own consensus, and they did that with talking to each other and kind of having rounds, and they voted and all that, and they relied on this idea of Bayesian fault tolerance. So they kind of could quantify the chances that they're not in a consensus, and they try to make that quantity as small. Okay. Well, with 13 and 14, what's happened is people put like masternodes, when they first want to get active on the network, they'll put a transaction on chain. And it's a really weird transaction. Usually has the same input, the same output, use just one input, one output. It's the same address. And then in that transaction, there's like, if you look at the raw transaction, it'll say extra payload. And in that extra payload, they say, oh, yes, I want to run a masternode. It's going to be at this IP address. Here's this here's this address that I want to be considered the operator address. Here's a BLS public key that we want to use to signal that I signed something. Here's an address that I want the payout to go to. So now the masternodes aren't getting paid at the same address. Generally, they won't get paid at the same address that the collateral is. So that helps just, and there's even a way that you could say, I want to pay the person that's running the masternode like 1% or 2% of the reward. So that's kind of something that I don't think is being used right now, but in the future, I'm expecting services to be out there that will run the masternode for you, and you don't have to turn over your money at all. You can just stake it on, you just put your 1,000 at that one thing, and then you put another thing on chain that says, I want to pay him 1%, and the network's going to just say, okay, we're going to pay him 1%. This is huge for legal reasons, because if somebody's running a masternode for somebody, if they have to take the collateral, they're in custody of it, and then it's a big legal mess to be in custody of somebody else's money. So this way, you're really not ever taking custody of it. You're only getting the rewards. So this is for legal reasons that it's set up like this. Also, there's
and security reasons. You don't want to be handing your money to somebody else and they could just take off with it.
Exactly. Yeah. So that helps close one of these attacks that we talked about earlier about like this would be an exit scam, what we're describing, where somebody said, I'm going to run your node, and then it runs off with all the collateral. So this way, people can run nodes and not have the collateral. So they can't run off with the collateral. At worst, they can just shut their node down. Nobody gets paid, but you haven't lost your initial investment.
All right, so let's talk about Chainlocks. Dash has a new thing called Chainlocks, and I'm sure a lot of people out there want to know what exactly Chainlocks are and what do they accomplish.
So they have the BLS. So when the masternodes get registered now, they use BLS keys, which is a different type of key, and it's still using elliptic curves. It's still kind of a random number. There's a point on the curve, which is a public key. There's extra structure. If you go and look at it, there's a bilinear form that goes to some third group that's not even elliptic curve generally, and but there's some extra structure. With BLS, there's no prep round that needs to be done before you can produce an aggregate signature. So people can just like say, yes, I signed this statement, put it on the board, and if you need 3 people to sign it, somebody put it on like a bulletin board, put it out anywhere, like just communicate it through any means possible. That's why it's called a bulletin board. And somebody else can pull it off the bulletin board, put theirs on, and then the third person can take the 2 off and make their own and put them all together, and we get a valid signature. So the aggregate keys work that way. Now, with Chainlocks, it uses threshold keys, which for a chain lock, they take 400 masternodes with 400 keys and produce what's called a threshold signature, which is only valid if 60% of the masternodes signed off on it. So if out of 400, if 60% of those, if 240 of them sign off on it, then they can produce a valid threshold signature. When a new block comes out, it goes to those masternodes, and those 400 are public known. So this block it will go to all the masternodes, but it can even go to these 400 first if the software said to do that. But anyway, it gets to these 400, and they say, yes, I see this. This is the only block I see, and yes, I'll sign this. And if 240 do it, then they make a a threshold signature, and then that block gets signed, and this is the consensus rules kind of change once that happens, and it says this is the block, right? So with the old Bitcoin, the way Bitcoin worked, when you get a valid proof of work, that is the block. But there could be if somebody had a competing proof of work, it's kind of the network's in limbo. And so what this chain, it doesn't know, is it this one or that one? So with Chainlocks, it says, okay, you were the first I saw, I'm signing you. And almost always there's a signature and it locks in the block. Okay, and so you avoid these situations where the network's in limbo, or at least you resolve them, and you resolve them within a second or two, generally.
And if somebody wanted to attack it, I remember seeing in one of the blog posts, even if somebody wanted to attack this, they couldn't do a deep reorganization like we've seen in some other currencies, right? Like they might be only the reorganization a block or two, right?
Yes, I mean, Chainlocks in the wild, it may have failed one block, and I'm speculating, but I don't think I don't think it's failed for 2 blocks in a row. And if it has, I don't think it's ever failed for 3 blocks in a row. If they were attacking it, let's say they do DOS and try to take them down. If they take down more than 40%, then the chain locks won't work of that quorum. The chain locks won't work until the next 12 hours. Which, if that was targeted up against this one quorum, the next 12 hours, the chain locks will work. And then the attacker, they could start all over again. Attacker could go at it again. But in the DOS scenario, there's no way that a malicious one ever comes up. No way. Like, there's no way there's a dispute over which block is signed. I mean, there's no signatures. There's never a dispute about which block is signed. There's never somebody signing blocks that would give them an advantage. So basically, we're just saying the worst case scenario, what could happen, and it's not so bad.
Okay, so that's chain locks. That locks entire blocks. What's the difference between chain locks and the automatic InstantSend that also uses the same technology, right?
So InstantSend, I was looking at my client, and when I click it, it says long live Masternode quorum InstantSend. But in the documentation, it says that there's a quorum that's only 5 masternodes, and I thought that was the one used for InstantSend. So maybe I need to review my documentation. But with the InstantSend, there's at least 5 masternodes, and I think a 3 sign off on. So this transaction gets made, and this transaction might have 2 inputs. Okay, lots of transactions have 2 inputs. It could have 3 or 5. Every input gets sent to a quorum of masternodes, and then if the majority of those say yes, that's my first seen spending of that input, they'll sign off on it. Then once they sign off on it, that actually changes the consensus rules, so that if any block gets produced that has a conflicting transaction, has a one that double spends that particular input, then the whole block's invalid. So with InstantSend, it's like you send it to these nodes, these masternodes, as quick as possible, and what happens in practice is after a second or two, you get the lock already. That's what happens very often. There's a chance that it could not, but I've never seen it not. So after a minute or two, after a second or two, it's that you have the signature, and then anybody that produces a block, you can invalidate it by showing them the signature. Anybody that produces a block that double spends your spend, you can invalidate by letting them know about the signature. So this is something that I don't think the literature, like the literature, the computer science people have really wrapped their head around. I mean, at least not written down very well, because what is really happening is these masternodes are allowing you to have a dynamic consensus rule, this consensus rule that depends on how it's being used, on the first seen by certain nodes. And I mean, beyond copies of Dash, I don't think anybody's doing that. And I would actually like to see more rigorous theories about this developed. And I'm working towards that. I'm working personally, but I'm only one person.
Okay, so how do the two interact with each other? Okay, so as soon as you send a transaction, the block hasn't been created yet. So you send a transaction and the instant send is locked, all right? And then Chainlocks comes along later and locks the block. So how do these two interact with each other?
So, okay, so they provide different types of security. So like with a normal Bitcoin thing, there was always the window before the confirmation was always the worst, actually the chance of double spending. And so InstantSend is supposed to, or that signature on these inputs is supposed to basically eliminate the chance of double spend before it confirms. And then Chainlocks, once the block's locked in, it changes the consensus. It's like it changes the consensus rule. And I have a comparison to do with Bitcoin Cash in a second, Christopher.
Okay.
So remind me about that. But so when the block gets locked in, then that's providing security against a double spend after your confirmation, right? Because the way Bitcoin works, it's always the longest proof of work. And so if somebody came along with some super computer and couldn't make more work, it would undo your transaction. But with Dash, even if somebody came by with that supercomputer, they couldn't undo your transaction because the consensus rules are these masternodes have signed off on it. That's the one we agree on. That's it. Now the comparison to Bitcoin Cash, and I'm a little bit of a purist. Okay.
Can I stop you before you begin? I just want to summarize what you just said, and I want to see if I understand it right. Okay, so when you send an instant send transaction, you're protecting yourself before the transaction's been confirmed, right?
Right.
And then when you do the chain locks, you're protecting yourself from after the transaction's been confirmed.
Yeah, you go.
And then if all of that fails, you just go to simple proof of work, and you're just as secure as Bitcoin.
Right.
So people that are watching this, you see how secure Dash is? It's very secure. When you're using a Dash transaction, you have like triple protection compared to Bitcoin.
And it only, yes, so I'm glad you're reiterating on this. So, and it only, and just in practice, we're getting data. It's live on the network now. We're getting data on it now. In practice, it only, there's only not a chain lock every once in a while. And this has, there's a thing that's called herd immunity. If you studied epidemiology, but the same thing applies here. It's if a certain percentage of people vaccinate against the disease, then the disease really can't travel between can't really spread in a population. And it's pretty much the same thing here. Since we've got so many chain lock, we got the instant send, we got the chain locks, even in that split second where it didn't work, the attacker is already has so little impetus to wait for these windows. It's going to be so much work, so much more work. And that's what all this is. It's just to make sure that the work to make the system not work the way it's supposed to is just so much extreme that you might as well go along with the system.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so now you can get into your Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah. So Bitcoin Cash, so, last year, 2 years ago, probably 2 years ago, there was this split where this one client that's calling itself Bitcoin Satoshi Vision kind of split off, and now there's the same. Well, and then there's the other people that were running clients that I'm going to call those two groups of people Bitcoin ABC and Bitcoin Unlimited. They were running two nodes implementations that work together, so it's the same chain but two different node implementations. Anyway. So when that split happened, there was a hard-coded lock, basically a chain lock, that was put into the ABC chain. And some people not the ABC chain, but on the ABC client, excuse me, it wasn't in the chain, in the client. And some people were saying that was horrible, but Satoshi did that. It wasn't horrible, okay? There was plenty of precedent for it and all that. But then ABC was, in my mind, they got a little bit aggressive. And they put in their client that if a block has 10 blocks of work on it, then that one's locked in. So they put like a rolling lock. Now, the reason why I like chain locks better than what ABC is doing is because, well, there's really not a consensus over who has the 9 blocks. Now, yes, that's a lot of, proof of work that's put in the 9 blocks above it. But if ever there's a chance where there's 2 sides that are 9 blocks high, then there'll be some confusion about which one's the real one. And if not every node sees the same thing, there's a chance they just introduced a forking risk into their chain.
Okay.
And, so basically, when I was writing up the security of Chainlocks, I'm basically saying there's no forking risk. I mean, you need malicious actors that control a lot of Dash. And so I was a little bit concerned about this introduction of forking risk, and the way they did it was kind of ridiculous. They put it in ABC, but they didn't talk to Unlimited, which is another implementation, and try to get them to go along with it. So now they're literally enforcing different protocols. Most likely 10 blocks back isn't going to change, but I'm not really comfortable assuming that it never will. People complain about Dash with the masternodes introduce some centralizing thing, but you get so much more. You get so much more security by saying, yes, these people who we agreed upon, who we have these public keys buried by a ton of work, we agree that they're going to tell us the first thing. Whether than Bitcoin Cash saying, well, we think 10 blocks, it will never change. But
yeah, and I don't really understand the argument about decentralization. Like the Masternode network isn't really that centralized, because I run some Masternodes, some other people run some Masternodes like across the world, and some other people run Masternodes from this corner of the world.
Right.
How is that centralized? You know what I mean? And it might not be as decentralized as a network where everybody can run a Masternode, but the reasons why it's not that decentralized are quite clear, and you've explained them. But so when you take that into consideration, the Masternode network is pretty decentralized, if you ask me.
When I was working for Dash, there was a period where the Litecoin fees started to go up. And so I immediately start looking at their network, seeing if the same thing's going on with Litecoin that's going on with Bitcoin, because if somebody put a bunch of transactions in Litecoin, that would put the fee up. But that wasn't happening. And I was trying to say, why is this happening? Why is this not working the way it should? Why is Litecoin not working the way it should? The only thing I could figure out is that there were so few nodes of Litecoin. Like there was less than 100 nodes like that were reachable. So the amount of servers that Litecoin was running that could be connected to from outside was quite small. And that's the only thing I could figure that was causing the Litecoin network to have basically hiccups. And Dash network, we've never seen that happen, and we've seen, I don't necessarily recommend the community doing this, but the community did stress test the network. Finally worked exactly like we did, and like exactly what our research said. Our research says it can go higher than what it is now. So I think there's a need to have a good amount of nodes, but there's not a need to have everybody running a node. Mm-hmm. And there's a need. It's almost more important that the people running nodes are running quality nodes than everybody running a node.
Yeah, so if you're new to Dash and you haven't tried it yet, and you have that taking those security practices that we mentioned from the top of the show, if you try doing a Dash transaction and compare it to a Bitcoin transaction, there really is no comparison. So all these things that we're talking about here are things that go on behind the scenes, but you can really see when you're trying to use a Dash transaction how this technology is making the experience much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I used BitInstant the other day to buy to help me get a plane ticket, and I used Dash, and it, I had the gift certificate like in 5 seconds, maybe less, and then I was posting about, oh, this is so great. Some people said that this BitInstant is really quick on some of the other currencies, and I'm like, whoa, I'm a little bit worried for them that. With Dash, that they did this, I feel good because I'm like, oh, there's no way I could scam them. They didn't scam me. But with the other ones, I'm worried that the customers will scam them. So,
they'll probably find out the hard way.
I guess.
But yeah, so it depends on your own risk tolerance, I guess.
Yeah,
So I think it's Bit Refill that you're talking about, right?
Oh,
That
Bit
Bit
Refill.
Instant.
Oh yeah, BitInstant
Yeah.
is dead. They're done project.
Yeah. All right. So it's been nice talking to you, Darren. Is there
Thank
anything
you.
else that you would like to talk about before I let you go?
Oh, I think we covered a lot. This has been great, long time. So yeah, so there's a lot of good that can happen in the space, and there's just a little bit of knowledge. If everybody just has a little bit of understanding, it really can help everybody out a lot. So definitely research your computer security, consider your practices on backing up, with encrypting your wallets, even the operating systems you use. So anyway, and have fun. So.
And you're very knowledgeable about these things. If somebody out there wanted to contact you to ask you a question, what's the best way to reach you?
I guess that would be, if you're watching this whole thing, I guess I can tell you, just go Darren at tappmath.com. TAPP. Anyway, tappmath.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll edit this and I'll leave it down in the description below, and I'll put it up on the screen for you.
Yeah, if you go to tappmath.com, you'll see the email info@tappmath.com. I'll get that a little slower, and you email Darren, I'll get that quicker.
All right, so thanks for coming on the show for this third episode of the Darren Tapp Files. Stay tuned for our next episode, which is going to be all about the evolution of Dash from its beginning to its present time. So very happy to have you on the show, Darren.
All right.
Until the next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Christopher.
Bye for now. Well, that was my interview with Darren Tapp for the third episode of the Darren Tapp Files. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and click the bell if you want to see more from me and my guests in Cash Alternative TV episodes. Until next time, remember, Dash is a better money for a better future, and that future is getting closer every day. Bye for now.